All right, hello and welcome to the Happy Running Podcast. My name is Drew, and I'm here with Beth and Tony. I'm a runner based in Flagstaff, Arizona, and we're talking to Beth about a little bit about her journey from being a runner and transitioning into triathlon, which is Tony's realm. Tony is a Ironman himself, and yeah, we're just gonna talk a little bit about what that transition was like for Beth, from her perspective as an athlete, from my perspective, kind of coaching and guiding as much as I can, and from Tony's perspective as an experienced triathlete. So, um, welcome, guys. I guess I'll start by asking Beth a few questions about her background. And Beth, could you tell us a little bit about how you got into running and what it means to you?
Okay, yes, happily. So I started running actually when I was 15, and it's pretty much all because of my dad. I was a swimmer growing up. I did competitive swimming. I was a breaststroker. I did some relay, and I also did synchro for about 8 years of my childhood. So I was always in the water. And I was 14 and I had the choice, maybe 13, I had the choice to either pursue swimming seriously or just quit altogether. And at the time, I think for a teenager, that's a lot to ask, a preteen. And so I made the decision to quit, um, pretty much because I had to commute and I didn't want to have to commute. And when I'm in Montreal, Quebec, the winters are harsh. I didn't want to winter swim. So I let go of swimming. And then as most teenagers I went through kind of a hard time, went through a bit of a depression when I was 14 to 15. And by the time I was 15, my dad basically was not having it. I grew up watching my dad run. He ran a bunch of marathons. He was always training, always in the gym, playing hockey. Fitness was always really important to him. And uh, basically, one day he just told me, we're getting you running shoes, and you're coming on the mountain with me. Montreal has a mountain called the Mont Royal, and that's where my dad would always run. It's kind of like a little oasis in the city. And he said, "You have no choice, but you're coming with me." And it was awful. I hated it, but I also at the same time loved it because swimming, you kind of have to push your body, and I miss that feeling of that suffering. And so it was my first time, I think, running, and I did a 5K. And I remember during my 5K, I kind of had uh, a boost of energy, and I passed someone on my run, on the run up. So it was 2.5K up and then 2.5K down. And I passed someone, and I remember feeling that felt really good, being that I hadn't moved in such a long time. And then it just kind of it stuck from there. I mean, I shouldn't say stuck because every single weekend, my dad basically said, "Get your shoes on, we're going running." And he would force me every single weekend, whether I felt good or not. And I think it took about 2 years of me doing that with my dad. And then at 17, I think I just remember going off and running on my own here and there. And I would say I'm not a natural runner. I met a few people in my life that basically lace up their shoes for the first time and they go for a 30-minute run and they're barely out of breath, which is so annoying. And for me, it was a struggle. And I think it took about 4 years. So by the time I was 19, that's when I finally felt okay. Um, I'm understanding this. My body's reacting well to running. The energy levels there. I was starting to feel fit in my running and in general too, because I mean, I had lost so much fitness when I stopped swimming um, and basically I think running and my dad, thankfully, it changed my life and it brought me back to fitness. And another thing that happened too was when I was 17, I went back in the gym. So I had stopped going to the gym for about 3 years. I was strength training when I was really young. And so finding that again also was just boost of confidence. I felt better about everything in general. My attitude was changing. I felt like I was coming out of, also I was growing up when I was not so much a teenager anymore, which are terrible times sometimes. And yeah, so from there I just kind of um, kept running, kept going to the gym. I did have a period when I was about 21 where I did the typical thing and I overran, overtrained, underfueled because I kept thinking I got to be lighter. So I was pretty much starving myself to a certain degree. And I was getting faster and I felt amazing on my runs. And I think I was probably addicted to running. So I was running in the morning, I was running in the evening after work. If I could get a third run in, even if it was just 2K, 3K, I would do it. Especially if I ate a little bit too much in the day, I would get a run in to make sure that I would even that out. It was not a healthy relationship with running, but I'm glad I went through that because then I learned a lot from that as well. Also, the gym saved me when that came to um, I got an injury. Basically, I got a sciatica, and I could not walk for about a month. And after that month, I got back in the gym. And then once I got back in the gym, I started wanting to feel stronger. And for that, you got to eat more and you got to, you know, you just have to fuel, you have to rest. And so then slowly but surely, I went back to running and I've been going back to running, I would say off and on throughout my 20s. I was going, I was going in and out of it, sometimes more seriously than others. So I did try for a couple of marathons in my 20s. My dad was pretty much my trainer throughout my 20s. And it's kind of funny
Do you,
because he
Beth,
had the,
do you think that your dad's like outlook on training and I think his generation most likely, I'm guessing that has a little bit of a different outlook than someone like me, who you know me pretty well now. Do you
Mhm.
think that maybe he had a different outlook than people have today on like what's a healthy relationship with running, and did that kind of shape your outlook before your like more recent history?
I mean, it's funny you asked that, but my dad's kind of like he was kind of like a cowboy when it came to training, whereas it was, he likes to drink, he likes to eat well, and then, the next morning it's like, get your shoes on and we're gonna go run. And I mean, I was partying and he would basically show up at my mom's house, where I was living at the time, and he would say, I'm outside, get your shoes on. And it would be 7 a.m. on a Saturday, and all my friends would be sleeping in the basement, and I'd be hungover. And I mean, I had no choice but to go. He would not leave until I came out and ran. And a couple of times I would throw up on the run from just feeling like complete shit. Can I swear on here? I don't know.
Yeah.
And okay. So, and basically he would say, "All right, like that's it. Now you're going to feel better." And his approach was just very, I talked to him about the fueling. I talked to him about overtraining. I did mention, and what's overtraining? What are you talking about? But at the same time, I never once witnessed my dad overtraining. I think I've seen him overdo it and push himself in the sense, um, where, he got like an injury in the gym once. But running, I think he was doing so many things. So he was playing hockey, gym, running, all that stuff. I I think his work ethic and his training ethic, I did take that on, but I mean the addiction to running and what I went through when I was 21, that was all on me. That was my obsession. And
Yeah,
yeah, I don't
that's
know.
That's kind
funny.
of
I
that was kind of funny.
he's old school.
Yeah, yeah. When you were going through this thing, I think you mentioned something. You said you missed the suffering And it all of a sudden clicked, oh, that's why she went right into triathlons and did a half, because we like to suffer. I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I had a quick question
Yeah.
for you, Beth. When you
Yeah.
did you also see the running? Because this kind of relates, more to me and why I do these things. But did you feel like it was your mental medicine? It was something that I don't know if it was the endorphins or whatever it is. It was able to kind of get you maybe out of your depression, out of the things that you were feeling, those negative thoughts. Did that kind of help you through that period?
Yeah. 100%. I think for me, and I don't want to simplify it because I think mental health issues and just mental health in general is so complex. And I think there's different kinds of therapies that work for different people. But for me, that's what I need to balance me out, to make me feel sane. It can completely change my outlook on life, on my day. So sometimes I would wake up. I remember in the early days of him forcing me to go run, I would wake up and I mean it was dark. It was so dark. And and the moment we would finish our run, I remember my dad said to me once, he said, I said, "Oh, I can't wait to eat." And he said, "One of my favorite things after running, it's not the feeling that you get after the run, it's the feeling you get once you've showered and then you go into the kitchen and you make yourself a meal and just that
I like that.
feeling of what's next, yeah, like what's next in my day." And you just feel there's a sense of peace and quiet. And I did get someone asked me recently, "Do you run with music?" Um, and I said no, only if I'm on a treadmill, because I mean, can't handle treadmill. I mean, I've had to do it when my AirPods would die, but basically, no, when I'm outside, I run with no music. And they said, "Oh, a purist." And and I wouldn't call it a pure I wouldn't call it a purist. I think it's more, there's so much noise in our lives, in our daily lives, that for me, running and with nothing, just the sound of your footsteps and your breath, it just regulates all of it and quiets everything down. And so that I think is what happened to me when my dad got me running when I was 15, is all the noise, all the shit talk I was telling myself, it just got quieter and quieter, but it took a long time. It wasn't first run and I'm cured. It took at least 2 solid years of him forcing me to run, and running in the winter too, because that's something for any Easterners that go through these harsh winters. It gets pretty damn dark, and I suffer from the seasonal affective disorder, and I didn't know it until later. And so going on runs and being outside, but what's so funny is that we would go, it's now I run with like a proper jacket and all that stuff. But I used to run in a cotton hoodie, like my dad was like, "Just put a hoodie
Like
on
the
and you'll get
thermiest.
warm in 2 minutes," Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Rocky
Like, "Oh, you're
Balboa.
cold for the first 2 minutes." Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, so I think it did take a little bit, but running really, when I say saved me, I really do think it was that for me. It might not be that for everyone, but I think there's something to training and working out and moving your body. I think it
Yeah.
helps everyone. Does it fix everyone? No, I
Yeah.
don't think.
There's it's funny, there's like some practical things that I recommend sometimes to people, like especially who people who have trouble like kind of regulating their effort during a run, or maybe don't have a good sense of like, this is what a recovery run this is what an easy run is, this is what a you know higher end threshold run is, this is like a faster threshold, down to like really hard efforts. A lot of people kind of have like two gears. They have like kind of fast and like as hard as they can go. And
Yeah.
one way I think to kind of combat that is just be conscious of like turn off all the noise. Like you said, take your AirPods out, leave your phone at home, even leave like your watch at
Mm,
home. But sometimes the data is pretty helpful. And
hmm
just go out for a run. Just go for a run, and it's like, okay, run today run as slow as you possibly can and feel what that feels like. Notice what your breathing rate is, notice your cadence, how long your stride is, that type of thing. And then transition on maybe a workout day. Okay, I'm going to run hard for a minute at a time. And then I'm going to walk in between, or I'm going to run really slow. And I think a lot of the noise, even like data, like your watch, most people, they're just constantly looking at their watch. Even some professionals that I've met, like constantly obsessed with pace. And
Yeah.
that's not healthy either, you know? But I feel like a lot of the things that I talk about a lot, or like I've talked to you about, Tony, running to effort, running to feel, understanding what are all the definitions of like how hard I'm working, and having kind of like in the back of your mind, you kind of have all those things logged. So today, check the box for recovery. Tomorrow, what's the purpose?
Mm-hmm.
You know, steady, easy run. Then next day,
Mm-hmm.
okay, threshold workout. And kind of building that like library in your head, you know, and really being able to perform. I think that's super key, and cutting
Yeah,
out
I
the
think the
noise.
combo, right? I mean, I think the
Yeah.
combo of actually kind of knowing, just kind of sort of feeling where your zones are, and also being able to like really know, like metric wise, where those zones are. I think for me it helps because if I'm feeling like I'm really kind of pushing, and then I go look at my, my metric, I look at my watch, and I'm like only at a zone sort of 2 or something. I kind of know, okay, well, maybe I'm dehydrated, maybe I didn't sort of fuel or whatever. You have an opportunity to really feel, um, hey, something's off here. So I think as important it is, I think, to be able to feel, I think it's equally as important to make sure that you kind of clearly know where your your zones are on your watch and what have you, and you're kind of looking at both of them. Because I think both of them together allow you to analyze exactly how you're feeling.
That's a
Yeah.
actually, if I could share like a little bit of a recent personal story, exactly that problem. Been a little bit off since I've been building up to this marathon, and I've noticed a couple things, and one of them was I would go out on, let's say, like a really easy run, but most of the time, day after a workout, day after a harder effort, and I caught myself being like really out of breath, and I was like, oh gosh, like more than just Drew's like running at training at 7,000 feet, but like stopping on my run and like trying to catch my breath, you know, and I was pretty worried about it, and I quickly like looked up some symptoms that I had, which was mainly the out of breath thing, and one big one was anemia, and so like low iron and ferritin, very common in uh, high altitude training and
Okay.
specifically runners. And I was like, oh shoot, I haven't got my iron or my ferritin checked in like 2 years. Right when I moved to Flagstaff, I checked it, was all good, never bothered to check it again. Uh, so that day I was like, oh, perfect. Just like what you said, Tony, like, okay, I know myself, I know how I usually feel, and I know like these like markers, you know, and like so if my heart rate is 120 and I'm going pretty easy, but like I'm completely out of breath, there's probably a problem, you know? And so I went and checked it out, got a blood test. Everything was pretty good. So I could rule that out and move on. What's the next thing? Like, am I getting enough rest? And so I've been really prioritizing rest, getting naps in, like being extra just careful on days after a workout, and it has made a difference. And I think, you know, if we're able to narrow down from the biological markers to the mental and like the human element that you talk about, Tony, it's I think that's huge just for guiding training. So that was my experience.
But what about when, like, for example, I had a run recently and it was an easy run, and you looked at my stats and you were like, you're running too fast, your heart rate's too high. However, it's a heat wave here, right? So I guess is more a question when I'm looking down at my watch, which I was checking my watch and I could see I was in a higher zone than I wanted to be, but I felt amazing. I felt great. I felt solid. It was like 32 degrees here, which I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. It was
That's
pretty
about
damn
90
hot
degrees.
and humid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's about
very hot
90.
and humid. And it
Warm.
was, lunchtime and it's warm. And you called me out. However, I did feel really good. So sometimes that's where I get a little bit annoyed with the data, with the stats, with the tracking, because I'm not relating to what it's telling me. But then am I wrong? Is what I'm feeling wrong? That's where I'm not. I don't know. Sometimes I'm
I
not
do feel like
sure.
it's a balance too, you know, like in my opinion, it's knowing yourself well enough, and like between a coach and an athlete, like I actually have a pretty good sense that you understand how hard you're working and you're conscious of it. The fact that you texted me and were like, "Hey, did I go too fast?" I mean, that's an indicator that either you know you went a little too hard or you were feeling really, really good.
Hmm.
And when I first saw it, I was like, I didn't know it was hot. And I
Yeah.
look at the data, it's like, oh, if your heart rate's 165, I don't care how old you are or how, you know, if you're female or male. Females tend to have a higher heart rate too.
Yeah.
165 is like way harder than
Whoa,
an easy effort. For me,
whoa, whoa.
that's like beyond that's like beyond my threshold effort, which is like beyond our race pace. You know, that's more like 30-minute race
Not
pace.
me.
Not you.
Hold on though. It
Yeah,
wasn't 165. It was
as at the
161. Come on. Come on.
my point though is like understanding yourself and understanding how hard you're working is probably the most important piece. Because if you go out, someone who doesn't understand what they're doing or like how hard they're working, they're going to go out and do that all the time, kind of
Yeah.
inadvertently, and not really
Yeah.
realize what they're doing. Someone like you who's focused on that over a period of time, like what is it, 2 years probably, and knowing yourself, you have a sense that like, okay, that might have been borderline, you know, and but you
Yeah.
factor in the heat, you factor in all these you know, externalities that affect you.
Yeah.
um Maybe it was borderline, but is that okay on a random day of the week when it doesn't conflict with a workout and you're, you know, I think it's
Hmm.
totally fine. But when it's where I like do get really nervous is someone where you don't have that level of trust build up and they do that often, and you have to remind them and you have to go in and like kind of define those things,
Yeah.
and that's where you could get into problems, you know.
Yeah.
But now you know though. I mean, if it's a trend that, hey, 90-degree weather or whatever it is, and you're going to have a higher heart rate. I mean, that's great knowledge to have, and you still felt good, so might not be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Learning.
I had I had a couple things written down, Beth, things that challenges in the transition. So we've talked a bit about running, positioning now. The like you had this desire to go into triathlon, and not just triathlon, a 70.3 Ironman. So that's like most people probably wouldn't do that for their first race. So there were a couple things in building up. You know, I have a sense of what's the volume that you need to be doing to perform at that type of thing. Tony does as well. Someone
Yeah.
who's not experienced, I don't think they know what goes into that. So did you feel confident transitioning from running going, okay, I'm going to jump into 70.3, or did you feel like this is uncharted territory and you had a lot of learning to do?
I knew I had a lot of learning to do, but I think I was overly confident. I think I was so determined to, I guess, become a triathlete or do triathlons and start. And I just felt, okay, I'm a good swimmer. Swimming, I got it down. Running, I can do running. No problem. What I was nervous about and still am is the bike, to be quite honest. The bike made me nervous. Clip shoes, I'd never done that. And so I think I felt like I knew I had a lot of work ahead of me, but I was excited about it and I wasn't scared. I like I said, I like suffering a little bit when it comes to that. And so I was looking forward to the challenges, and the training was starting in the winter. So I took this as a proactive way to counter any kind of mood shift that I might feel from the cold and missing the sun. And I thought this is going to be my solution. And so there was a bit of that. And then there was also, I've been talking about doing triathlon for so long. I had this goal, but by the time I'm 35 to have done a full. I'm 35, so I have not done a full. However, I'm happy with targeting the 70.3. I think it makes sense now, and I'm letting go.
Yeah.
It was an arbitrary goal, but it doesn't mean I'm not gonna do a full. But yeah, I think
Next
I
year.
felt next year. I felt confident going in. I wasn't overwhelmed, and I had you as a coach, and I was excited about, exploring triathlon through the coaching and stuff. And yeah, I hope that answers it.
Yeah, totally. And Tony, how much does like past history in certain disciplines in triathlon factor into training? Because I have some thoughts, but I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah.
When someone has like a strong background in swimming, like Beth, like do you factor that into the training and structure?
Yeah, it's funny. Usually, when someone wants to get into triathlons, they're usually weak in swimming, and it's the swimming thing that really, prohibits them from kind of moving forward and being able to do those things. So you already having that actual background, I think, was already an advantage, right? It's like, and even though you had trouble on the bike, hey, you're getting on the bike and you're just kind of riding, right? The thing's going to go, and so I don't think it's as nerve-wracking as the swimming, but when you look at the training, oftentimes when I'm kind of taking athletes in or whatever, I always like to get an idea of the history of each kind of discipline. How long have you been doing it and what have you? Because if there's certain things that they're going to have to work on a little bit more, I'll probably give them a little bit more sort of session time. Maybe like for you, you're really good in swimming. Well, maybe you only need kind of once or twice a week. Where maybe the bike, you need to get in there at least 3 sessions. You're a good runner. Yeah, maybe three, but would vary. So yeah, I mean, I think going back to the history, because I mean, shoots, I was a runner as well, and I don't do as much. I'm a little bit older now, so I really need to watch my my volume. So I do a decent amount of running, but I don't really sort of push myself kind of too much, and I really spend a lot of time on the bike. So I think that's where I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to make my most gains. And it's awesome that you're not a bike rider, because now you have an opportunity to really see some huge gains. Because if you focus in on that, that's where I think you're going to start to see those times come down.
I
Yeah.
actually just was watching. Sorry, Beth, go ahead.
No.
I was just watching the Olympic triathlon races yesterday, and I do think, I don't know if it's because I'm biased as a runner, but I think that being highly skilled in the run is a very valuable skill to have. And like I like what you're saying, Tony, about like finding what are the weaknesses and where do I need to focus on skill wise, and just narrowing in there and really trying to perform at that one area, and then maybe you move on to something else. And I mean, who doesn't want to hop on a bike trainer in a basement in Montreal all winter? But it's
Oh, oh man. But can you tell you guys why I got on the trainer excitedly? I did not, and I stayed on it for a while everyone was starting to go outside. I stayed on it for about a month, and I was even thinking maybe I'm just not gonna bike outside in the summer until maybe I'll do all the training inside. And it's because last year I started biking. I think I had gone on 3 bike rides with the bike. I'd fallen a bunch. Everyone's like, you're gonna fall at least once.
Yeah.
Well, this girl fell at least 5 or 6 times, always at a red light.
Yeah. Whoa,
Um,
whoa, whoa, whoa!
yeah,
It's
couldn't
like slow motion,
not.
right?
It's slow motion. Once it was in front of like a 40-person peloton. It was great. It's
Oh,
like, but the kicker was that on the third bike ride, I injured and killed a bird. And so that was just traumatic. And I was so upset, and I said to myself, the bike's not for me. And I mean, to this day, I have butterflies before every bike ride. It's, I if I know I have a big bike ride the next morning, I will have a hard time sleeping because I'm anticipating the bike. And there's a lot of birds here and on our bike paths and stuff. And so that is why I was really excited to get on the indoor trainer. I got Swift. This is my jam. And I mean, I know we're going to talk about it, but that's a little bit where I went. I went ham on my training and lost a
Yeah.
little bit of the focus. And
Well,
yeah.
and like I'm also jealous of people who cycle. I'm jealous of both of you guys because you cycle, and it's such a low impact way to get a lot of your base training in. And as a runner, it's like you have to be really obsessed with mileage. I don't like I think more in terms of hours, just because
Mm.
mileage can be kind of arbitrary. But the bike is a great way to get like all that base training done, especially if you've got a trainer in your basement with Zwift and like, a TV show or something on. Uh,
Mhm.
it's fantastic. I encourage a lot of people that I coach to do as much cross training as they can, despite me being kind of traumatized from trying to start cycling and then getting like weird hip, you know,
Yeah,
twinges and
yeah. I was gonna bring it up. I said you were riding, and then you said, the heck with it. I'm selling a bike. I'm done.
I know. It's well,
Oh, I
and
didn't
also
know this.
crashing. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm terrified of crashing too, because everyone
Crashing
I know
too.
Yeah.
who cycles has crashed, and a
Hmm.
lot of them have been really bad.
Hey, honestly
Yeah.
though, I'm kind of the same way as you guys. I mean, especially I don't like riding. Not necessarily. I mean, I feel very confident in myself. I don't feel very confident in the drivers and what have you. Even though it's
Mm.
so wonderful to be able to bike out here in California. I mean,
Mm.
I'm the same way. I'm on my bike trainer more one because of that, but then I think also because I really get the zone in on my zones. I know what my efforts are. When I'm outside, it's kind of cool, but it's really hard for me to gauge. If I have to do like 15 minutes of zone 4 stuff, I have to make sure that I have, enough road and runway to be able to do that. Where on the bike
Yeah.
trainer, as boring as it gets sometimes, I can clearly understand, where my zones are, and I can do them easily.
Yeah.
It's almost
No, the
like Tony
trainer's
knew.
definitely,
It's
sorry.
almost like Tony knew where we were going with this. But go ahead, Beth. I have a feeling you know as
No,
well.
the tr the tr no, I'll let you get into that. But the what's cool in Montreal, I discovered is we can use the F1 track to do that. So at least because right now, I mean, anyone in this area is gonna. I'm biking outside now. I'm cycling outside. I want to be outside. I see the benefits and it's nice. I am stressed when I'm biking in the city. Um, Getting to the track or getting to where I want to go and train where it's a bit safer. But um, yeah, the indoor bike trainer is excellent for those kind of workouts, and then the easy ones. Um, I would even say even the easy ones, because like you said, you could put a show on. And but I haven't caught the bike bug yet. And everyone told me, oh, when you start triathlon, biking ends up being your favorite. And I don't know about you, Tony, but it's still not mine. I could do without the bike. I'll be
Well,
honest.
we get away. I think for me, I mean, I like bike riding, but the cool thing is all the different types of bikes and the gadgets that you can get on the bike to make
Hmm.
you just a little bit faster. The aero bars and the wheels and the aerodynamics of it all. It's I think that's where all the gear junkies get super super
Yeah,
excited, and they spend a lot of their effort and money into those things.
yeah. Maybe I'm just not there yet, but yeah.
It's similar with runners. I find most runners obsess way too much over shoes,
Shoes.
and it's
Yeah.
almost it's kind of counterproductive because if you most people don't look at the shoe as a tool, they look at it as like a gateway to their fitness, and I think
Hmm.
I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe, if you get too much into the gear, I think you can get way too focused on things where the gains from those things are like really small. And it's great to have like really nice stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like I have way too many shoes, and I love the intricacies of how they perform and how they change your experience of running. And I've also purchased a bike that's on the higher end, and then I've actually returned it and purchased a bike that was cheaper because I felt like it was almost like too much. Like I needed to really focus on the base level cycling that's going to get me better, and before I deserve something that's that that expensive, as big of that big of a
Well,
price tag, but also that big of like
yeah.
an engineering feat.
Well, it's like in surfing, like I'm a beginner surfer, and I did take a smaller board one time, and I had a bunch of people that knew me in the water say, "What are you doing? Like, that's the most kook thing you could possibly do is go straight to a smaller board." And it's true. And I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't catching waves, and I wasn't getting the benefits, and I wasn't learning from the baseline. So going back to a bigger board, and then you work your way to that smaller board. It's the same with the bike. I have a very basic bike, and I know, Tony, you're like, you're gonna want to upgrade, and you're gonna want to, and I know I'm gonna
Just a
want to
little
upgrade,
upgrade. Just a
just
little
just a
upgrade.
little. And I know, like, I already put the aero bars, and that was a fun little addition. But I'm aware, like you were saying, Drew, the same thing. I'm not ready for a TT bike. I'm not ready for that. I'm still out here killing birds, so I just need to,
And you need one of
get
those
you.
helmets that goes back, the
Yeah,
Sonic the Hedgehog helmets. That'll
yeah,
make you
not
fast.
there. Yeah, I mean okay, on the helmet thing though, I did go to the bike shop where I go, they're great. And they asked me, I told them, I have my first triathlon in 3 weeks, or I was there for a tune-up or in 4 weeks. And one of the guys asked me, oh, are you set up for this? Are you set up for that? What's the helmet that you're wearing? And I had this bucket helmet, basically like a skateboarding helmet that I used for, biking in the city. He's like, please don't wear that on your. And I was like, why? It's a helmet. It costs a good amount of money. It's a safe helmet. It's very, very safe. And he showed me a smaller one, and I was like, oh, I don't know about that. It doesn't look like it would protect my head, but I ended up getting it. And I'm glad I did because there was so much wind on the race. And that helmet probably helped me at least a little bit, helped me not feel so much resistance and all that stuff. So I get it. I get the gear. I get it makes a difference, and
There is
I
I
get it.
think there's, yeah, I mean, you get to a certain point where you probably don't need to, go over the top. But I will say from experience, when I did my first Ironman, I still had, I think it was still like mostly an aluminum bike. And when I went and I upgraded a little bit to, some of the latest and greatest technology, it made a
Mm,
world of a difference. So I think there's
yeah.
like right in the beginning, I think there's a big step from getting a regular road bike to just a entry level tri bike. It's, for me, it was night and day. But, so I
Mm,
guess all of you are really talking about like focusing on the engine, not necessarily the components, right?
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like a lot of the low hanging fruit, like I feel like what I'm referring to is it's all the low hanging fruit of, am I getting enough rest? Am I feeling
Yeah.
properly? Am I structuring my training so that I'm optimizing, like periodizing? Okay, I have a certain level of base training. I'm getting enough threshold and base aerobic work and like higher level aerobic work. And then also, am I doing enough strength and speed? Am I in the gym? All those things. A lot of, like, speaking in terms of runners, people go, oh, well, I'm going to get the Alpha Fly 3, and then they kind of forget
Yeah.
about some of the other things that go into it, even if maybe it's a slower runner. And there's studies that have shown that the gains from super shoes based on different pacing, they can like completely drop off. So like, yeah, it's like, oh, 4% gains when Nike first came out with the Nike 4% Flyknit or whatever back like 10 years ago. Um, that was with like highly trained athletes probably running at like elite or sub elite paces. And then you transition over to someone else who's more of like your average like park run type person. they're not getting those gains. But I don't think they know because of the marketing. So I feel like the low hanging fruit, check all the boxes, what I try and do, and then the other stuff is like icing on the cake. If you want the experience, and that's something you can afford, and you feel like it's good for you, great. But understanding that if the low hanging fruit isn't taken care of, the effects are kind of negligible sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Beth, I feel like we should talk a little bit about how we went from running into triathlon, going to kind of higher volume, but then how like recovery came into play. So, do you want to start off by talking a little bit about that?
Um, are you talking about my overtraining?
I was trying not to use the O word, but yes.
That's okay. Yeah, so I went a bit ham on my training, but I think we narrowed it down to it being because of what I was doing on the bike. So what I was doing on the trainer is that you were giving me moderate workouts, and I basically I didn't understand moderate. Because I didn't understand I don't understand the bike. I don't know the bike. I'm getting to know the bike. For me, moderate meant something. And so it meant kind of pushing it moderately. And even at that, I think I went above and beyond, and I enjoyed pushing myself on the trainer. I have to admit, I like the intervals. I like doing the 20-minute sets of, at a higher threshold and all that stuff. And so I was pre-selecting off of Zwift workouts. I wasn't checking them with you, Drew, and I was just going for it. And I was stressing my body out, and then I wasn't sleeping. I was barely doing any recovery. I don't even think I was stretching after the bike. So I was literally just putting in a large amount of time on the bike, very little in the gym. So I would go, I think I went 3 weeks without even stepping into the gym once during that period. And the gym for me at that point meant it was my place to do my PT work. It was my place to do, my proper stretching and mobility. So I was barely doing that. I wasn't taking the time. There was, work is always stressful, and there were life stressors at the time as well. And so I wasn't focusing on recovery whatsoever. And I mean, nutrition, I think I thought I had it under control. And I mean, I started gaining weight, and I would say when I realized I was gaining weight, I wasn't understanding it. So I thought I'm eating too much. So I need to be stricter with my food. So I think in terms of recovery, I also wasn't fueling my body right. My body, I guess, with the lack of sleep, um, I was constantly stressing. Even though I felt like I wasn't necessarily super stressed, I think what I was doing to my body was stressing it. And I'm now more than ever, I understand that there's a certain amount of slowing down that you need to do. Not just, ice baths and whatever. It's actually just breathing and relaxing and listening and to your body. And so I think I crashed probably at some point. I realized it when I went to visit some friends in Vancouver, and I just kind of, I mean, it was a buildup, but I was also not feeling well in any of my workouts. I was pushing super hard, and my heart rate was super high. I think also, Drew, we saw my resting heart rate, which I understand, it's from my watch and I'm looking at it in the morning, and I don't know how accurate it is. However, it was significantly higher than it had been in the previous months before I started training. So there was a lot of stuff that was just compiling. And when I visited my friends, I didn't have the bike. So it was basically a lot of running. It was going back into the gym and swimming. And I felt like shit on my swims. In the gym, I felt super weak. I could barely lift anything. And there was this weight gain that I didn't understand. And and I lost my period. As a woman, you know, we have our regular cycle. And I think when you're training a lot, you have to I'm very, you know, I track, and I make sure that, you know, that's something that is an indicator of health for me. And so I was basically going 2 months without it. And that had only happened to me when I was 21 and I was overtraining, overrunning. So that was an indication. But what I couldn't understand was that when I was 21 and I was running so much, under fueling, I was extremely thin. I was super skinny. And so I couldn't understand, how is it that I'm gaining weight and lost my period? So there was a lot there that I kept thinking it can't be overtraining, because if I'm overtraining, I should be losing weight, or I should be, you know, it just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. And so it was you, Drew, that was basically like, you're burning out, man. This is like you, and to be fair to your coaching, you had been telling me for a while, take it down, chill out, and you're going too hard on your training. And I wasn't listening. So I typically, in the past, we've been working together for a little bit, and I like to take direction. And I think I was so determined to be good at triathlon that I overdid it. I just overdid it. And I think it was a great lesson. I also had this idea of my age group that I was going to be in, and I was going to I'm going to do well because swimmer, and I'm a good runner, and I'm not super fast, but I'm a good runner, and I can handle endurance sports really well. So I was thinking, I'd do well in my age group, kind of a thing, because I'd be in the 35 to 39, I'd be the youngest. Meanwhile, like the 39-year-olds, I think it was a 39-year-old that got first in our age group. So yeah, so age has
Yeah.
nothing to do with it. And yeah, so to answer your question, I was not doing any kind of recovery, and I burnt out. And
And you touched
yeah.
on a couple things that, like, I was thinking back on this, I wrote down some notes, and you touched on all the things that we identified, which was the lack of kind of an understanding and communication of what proper zones mean, um, how those things are defined, and then you didn't have like that library in your head of, this is the effort level that I should be at for like these specific words. This is the dictionary of my training. And I think, Tony, I would guess that that's something that's probably pretty common to people who are going from one sport into a completely different realm, because zones can be different on the bike than on the run. And swimming, your effort levels can
Yeah.
be, but perhaps simpler or maybe more intricate on a swim than on the bike, So I don't know. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, they're all kind of different, right? I mean, your heart rate, when you're running is going to be totally different, when you're on a bike. I mean, on the bike, my heart rate is much lower. And then with the swimming, I mean, it's really all about, technique. I'm not a great sort of swimmer, so a lot of my real focus is on the actual kind of technique itself. So yeah, they're all extremely different, but super, super important to have nailed down. And in the beginning of this podcast, right, we were talking about kind of knowing your zones and kind of knowing your sort of feeling in each one of those zones. So, so, so important, because if you don't have that, I think that's what will happen. Beth was saying that you just going to go a little bit too hard, because, especially the A-type personalities, we just want to push, 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 push. And I think a lot of it is kind of pushing at the right times, right? You look at our bodies are always trying to kind of be at a state of, homeostasis, right? We want to be in a steady state. And we apply sort of pressure, or, we apply sort of stress to that body, right? I mean, the body has to respond, and it's going to recover to make sure that it can actually deal with that stress. But if we apply too much stress, we're never going to be able to get to that, what they were called, I think they refer to it as, super compensation, where then you go above and beyond where your original, level of like steady state is, you'll never get there because you'll get injured, you'll get burned out, and so super super important. So yeah, all that stuff comes into play.
Yeah, and like one of
Yeah.
the ways we kind of dealt with it, because I want to make sure when we talk about problems, I want to make sure we talk about like how do we solve the problem, because I think we did solve the problem, and we took a really really hard step back, and I think you saw
Yeah.
a doctor too to kind of validate some of these things. So you saw a
Hmm.
professional. Like I always say to people, like seek professional help, but have your protocol, go through the protocol. Okay, I'm identifying there's problem. This is a problem. What are potential solutions to that problem? Work on those low hanging fruit. If you still have the problem in a week or two, see a professional, and you did, and then validated. And what we did to kind of change some of those zones was, okay, on the bike, like let's define our heart rate zones, go off of heart rate. You were
Yeah.
really good about using a heart rate strap. I think that's fantastic personally. um, Plus you're on a trainer, so controlled environment, heart rate is really really reliable if you have a chest strap and you're in a controlled
Hmm.
environment. With Zwift, again, going back to like uncontrolled environment, Zwift. So then we realize, oh, when Beth's going in and selecting workouts, I might say moderate, and I don't use Zwift, but my understanding is there's like kind of rankings of different difficulty levels. So you're like, okay, right in the middle, you know? But right in the middle might
Yeah.
mean like you don't know what the hill profile is necessarily that you want to target. So there's like a bunch of intricacies where as a coach, I realize, oh, you know what? We need to like be really vocal in discussing what this means, uh, preparing for the course, because you're not going outside. Like, luckily, once you started going outside, you lived in the area where the course was, right? So,
A similar
didn't you?
kind of course. No,
Similar.
I was in a, it's very similar, like hilly and stuff. So I got to practice and yeah, it was good
Yeah.
for that.
And I remember we programmed some rides where you were going through to kind of simulate some of the uphills and stuff. There was like a long uphill, and I'd say, okay, go through it, and you surge on that uphill for a certain period of time, and then you go down. I remember you did loops. You had a friend also that you went on a ride with on a similar
Hmm.
course. So, like getting really, really specific, and I think that goes back to a lot of the skills of like define those zones. That's like, like 101, and then what are the skills that you need to focus on. And we realize, okay, we'll make some changes, we're on the same page, and then we like slowly ramp up from like a really low intensity, so
Yeah.
that like we really both were on the same page as far as like what does recovery mean. And then we obviously like the sleep and stuff is that had to improve,
Yeah.
that was like unsustainable, the amount of
Yeah.
sleep you were getting. But
Yeah. I was prioritizing training. So it was like, and I mean, also another thing is that, the pool was only available for me to swim, the pool I was going to, from 8 to 9 on certain days. So instead of me saying to you, hey, Drew, could you move this to that day so I could swim in the morning before work? I'd just be like, that's perfect. I'm gonna bike in the morning before work, and then I'll go swim from 8 to 9 at the pool. But then I had a run the next day or a bike session the next day. But by the time I'm back home and I'm in bed, it's really late. And instead of me thinking I need my 7 hours, it's fine. Like I'll get my 5.5, I'll get my 5 hours. It was all about prioritizing the training, and to the point that you guys made about the zones and the bike is, your heart rate's lower and whatnot. I did what a lot of runners or beginner runners do, where the fear of slowing down is gonna, it's gonna halt me from being faster or growing as a runner, and I'm doing too much zone two, I'm going too slow, all that stuff. I did that on the bike. I was so afraid that if I just stay in this easy zone where I barely feel it, I'm not building anything, I'm not gaining anything. And I think that was a big mistake. And that was me not listening to you in terms of, when you would give me a 2 or 3 hour easy, I was pushing because I was like, I'm new to biking and this is how I'm going to get better. So I did that super newbie mistake.
yeah, Can
Yeah,
can
without
you
having the
just
base.
the base. Yeah.
can you share a little bit about like how like realistically what are the numbers of how much sleep you were getting when you were under or when you were overtraining and undersleeping? And once we shifted and like got on the same page and you start prioritizing sleep, how much were you getting then and like what was the difference uh
So
to you how you felt, you know?
yeah. So what also happened with me going to Vancouver was my sleep. So it's 3 hours difference, right? It's 3 hours behind. So there was some jet lag. So basically, what I was doing when I was overtraining was I could get even, I would say between an average, I would say I'd go 4 hours to maybe six and a half. 6.5 was a lot of sleep. Six
Wow.
and a half was a good night. Was wow, like, which is so, it's so stupid, like
Yeah.
that I did
Well,
that to myself looking back. But but then going to Vancouver, I was so tired, and I think I slept maybe a 9 hour sleep, and I woke up feeling like I got hit by a bus, and we had the conversation of overtraining, and from then on, I decided um, something's wrong with my system, and I'm gonna try this sleep thing. I'm gonna prioritize sleep above all. And I was getting a minimum of 7.5. I wouldn't go below of sleep. And I to this day maintain that is that I will literally change or ask you to change my training schedule if I see that it's going to mean me sleeping less than 7 hours. I don't do that anymore. I'm not messing around. And another thing is you're just in a shit mood when you don't sleep enough too, so you're going into your workouts and you're not looking forward to them as well. So I would say I prioritize sleep. I still prioritize training just as much because I think, Tony, you called it type A personality. So I'm still going to prioritize my training. However, I'm much more flexible now. And when it comes to, I'm not so hard on myself when it comes to, I didn't get this session in. I very rarely skip a session, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I will move it around in my week. And so, yeah, so I would say now I'm really good with my sleep, but I mean, I know one time I got 3.5, and then I was flying out later. I think it was a work thing. I can't remember why I was traveling, but I had a big bike session in the morning. And because I was getting ready to fly out, I was packing all my bags. I was getting everything ready to go. I was making sure I had all my stuff so I could train when I was traveling. And I went to bed at around 1, and I was on my bike at 4:30 in the morning. And that's so like, what are you doing? But I so
Yeah, it's
that
funny
was yeah.
when that happens to me. I've had this kind of conversation with other folks, and it's just like, if you would look at all the folks, especially me also, my best performances, it wasn't always a 1-to-1 ratio of if I had an amazing, kind of training ramp, I was going to be successful in my race. It really varied. I think usually when I'm very successful is when I ate right, I was able to get my recovery in, I was able to taper, and that's where I usually would, I would come out, you know, the best. So I think it's knowing that you miss a workout kind of here or there, or maybe you go through the motions on a workout, it wasn't great. Those things really shouldn't matter. And I think you said it
Mhm.
earlier on again, you said looking at the whole sort of thing, not just having that, tunnel vision. I know we use another word for that. But I think tunnel vision of just that like one moment, it's like, yeah, that's not a big deal. Look at it, across your 6 to 8 months of training, and those I don't know, maybe 5, maybe even 10 sessions that either you kind of missed or kind of half-assed, those really don't matter too much as long as you're, consistent over your training block.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I've
Yeah.
I've learned that over the years too, is that consistency is by far trumps any sort of like big session or being a hero one day or 2 days out of like a 4 or 5 week period, you know.
Mhm.
A lot of people do want to, you know, in like a world of Strava kudos and, you know, people do training
Yeah,
groups and they want to show off to their friends.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
even even here in Flagstaff, where I'm training around people who are much better than me. I mean, world class athletes. You can see a different mindset with some people, and I've found that a lot of the people who have the best mindset, and they might be kind of crazy in terms of like how hard they really work. I think work ethic is just consistent. That's the one common thread, is that everyone at a high level has a really good work ethic. But I feel like the difference in performance and the difference in like just being confident and performing on one specific day is believing in yourself, trusting your training, and understanding that you're going to apply all of the consistency that you've allowed to build up and you've allowed your body to absorb it. Because when you don't rest and you don't eat well and you're stressed and you're mentally a mess, you know, we can all like kind of fall into those patterns, and then your body can't absorb what you're putting into it and all the work you're doing.
Mhm.
um, so you're kind of just spinning your wheels, and you're not really going to reap the benefits because you're not setting yourself up for success from a mental standpoint, from a physical
Mhm.
standpoint. I think that's huge. So the consistency factor is just over the long term. How can I stay the most healthy, be mentally the most put together, and like focused on my long-term goal, not letting the little daily BS get in the way, miss a
Mhm.
session, whatever, don't let it bother you, move on to the next one, you know, and
Yeah.
stack up those bricks, and then eventually you'll get where you want to go, you know.
And also, I think it's about enjoying it,
Yeah,
enjoying the
yeah, yeah.
process. And
I was going to
I
mention that
lost,
too.
yeah, I completely, I, I just lost that in terms of I mean, I'm not an elite athlete. And I'm not saying just because I'm not an elite athlete, I shouldn't take it seriously. For me, it's important to take training and these things seriously. It's what makes me happy. It's what makes me, it's part of a healthy balanced life for me, and it makes me happy to do these kind of feats. But i wasn't I wasn't having fun. What was I, you know? And I think that's where
It doesn't sound fun to get on the
no,
trainer on 3 weeks or 3 hours of rest and get on a plane after that, you know.
I mean, there's this David Goggins mentality that some people like to have, and I think I was doing that, you know, do hard things. um but life is short. I want to do this for a long time. And so why would I punish myself in this way? It doesn't have to be this way. And I can, and like what you guys are saying, I can be a better athlete by taking a step back, you know, focusing on recovery and being kinder to myself and just trying to enjoy, focus on the fun parts of it. So, and eventually, I don't know if we're going to get to the actual race, but I had fun, you know, which I wasn't expecting to have during the race. I expected to race the race, but I didn't expect to have fun. And I think I had more fun than anything.
And that was the mindset shift, I think. I remember several conversations where, but it's like the overtraining thing comes from a certain mindset of, I'm focused on these really short term things where it's like I need to like rip this workout super hard, because if I don't, I'm not going to be fit enough. I need the mental confidence. And it's okay to like do workouts where, okay, this is a confidence builder, you know, like
Hmm.
race simulation, like those are things that everyone does who's successful. But like when people get hyper focused on these really short term, seemingly like sometimes arbitrary too, right? Like if you
Hmm.
haven't done, let's say it's your first marathon, and you go, oh well, I need to run this marathon in 3.5 hours. It's my first
Hmm.
marathon. I know that I can do it. I believe in myself, but you haven't done it, right? So like having an open mind of,
Hmm.
um, like how can I like keep my mind open to any possibility, but also like enjoying myself, like you said, you know.
Yeah. I had time goals for this. I had time goals. I had, you know, just like I want to run my first a marathon at 3:30. I was like, I'm gonna run, I'm gonna do the swim at this time, I'm gonna bike at this time, and I'm gonna run at this time. And when the overtraining happened and we had to take a lot of steps back and rebuild, and I knew I wasn't gonna hit those times, um, it made me realize it's okay. This is my first of many, hopefully. And I don't know why I was holding on so tightly to this one being it, when it's one of many. So,
First
yeah,
one.
Yeah.
first
Yeah, when I had a
one.
coach, when I was, it was probably maybe 3 years, yeah, maybe 3 years ago. So when I had a coach, and I wanted to get to a certain time because I saw what all the other guys were doing in my age group, and I wanted to be in the top sort of three in my age group. I said, this is the time I want to have. Here's where I'm at now, and I'm doing this one next year, and that's where I want to be. And he just said, look, I'm probably not the right coach because he's like, look, at your age group, I can get you there, but it's going to be 3 years. So I can do it. I got
Interesting.
the formula. I can get you there. It's just going to be in 3 years, and I just wanted it. Wanted it next year, and I just had
Yeah.
to realize that this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
I've
Slow and
also
steady
That's
wins the
interesting.
race.
Yeah, I've also had that same experience, Tony, like me being on the other end, where working with someone where they're really, really persistent in saying, I need to be doing this type of workout in order to perform at this pace on this date. And, regardless of history, recent history, they just really believed that they could do it. And it's, I think like believing in people you're coaching is very important too. But belief is based on trust and based on like other factors where you have to make kind of like an educated guess as to what's going to happen. Where I want to give Beth a little bit of credit of setting a goal for your swim. You're very skilled in swimming. You had a very fast swim. That was awesome. I think having confidence in that swim, I don't see a problem with that. I think that's fantastic, and it's going to guide you to be successful. The bike was a little bit uncharted territory. Like we had no idea, right? And in
Yeah.
running, you also are a very strong runner, and we built up a bunch of running fitness prior. The only thing was, how are you going to perform after all the other stuff, which is like, I mean, just me
Yeah.
being only a runner, that seems huge. That's like a big goal to go after, So I feel like having realistic expectations of yourself and confidence, fantastic. But
Mm-hmm.
knowing when is this like uncharted territory, and when do I need to maybe pull back on my own expectations and my confidence
Mm-hmm.
to have a realistic view
Mm-hmm.
of like what might happen, and an open mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I got to the bike, and this is something that I'm gonna work on, and I'm gonna hopefully learn from, but the swim, I mean, because of the conditions, the I know I was fast on the swim, but they also cut it down, right? Because of the weather conditions. So I didn't get to do the full experience of a 1.9K swim. I think it was 1.17. And when I got on the bike, I remember thinking, just don't. And to Tony's credit, he sent you, and then you sent me this letter that I read the night before. I remember while I was, foam rolling and elevating my legs and stuff, and I read it. And at first, Tony, I thought it was a general letter that you gave to your athletes. And as I'm reading it, I realized you're actually talking about the Tremblant Blanc course. And I
Yeah, because
was,
I was running. I was there before, so I kind of knew the race.
yeah. And I was like, wow, that is the kindest. Wow. I mean, the triathlon world, the running world and triathlon, endurance sports world has the nicest, most generous people. And I was really touched. But it was a lot of good practical advice. And so when I got to the bike, um, I knew I was one of the first out of the water. A lot of people didn't get to swim. A lot of people got turned away and sent to the bike. But basically, you had said something really important. is that a lot of people are going to pass you. Everyone's going to be passing you on the bike. Just stay in your own race, focus on you. And the hills were tough. I think what are they called? The falso plano, the false flats
Oh yeah.
are, to me, were the hardest. And so the first 70K was a lot of that. And I mean, I was getting passed and passed and passed. I felt so slow. I'm in my own race, and I kept thinking about what you wrote in the letter. I'm okay, just focus on your own stuff. And sure enough, when we got to some pretty hilly parts on the last 20K, I did catch up to at least two people, so I felt good about that.
Nice, nice.
But then getting to the run after that, I mean, I was really scared. I was scared that my legs were not going to hold up because it was so hilly. And to be honest, I think as much as I trained, because I had done the overtraining and felt like I was restarting training from zero quite late in the game. And like you said, I was healthy for it. I wasn't my fittest, but I was healthy. I was really worried that my legs were just going to be completely done. So that's where I was surprised. I felt actually quite good. And I think that's what happens with the bike transition when you're training and you do the transition from the bike to the run. I always feel like my legs are a bit jello, but they wake up quite quickly. And
Yeah,
I
they do.
actually realize my pace is faster than it usually, my easy pace will be faster than it usually is. And then I have to pull back. But then obviously then your legs get tired, and that's where the fueling comes and all that stuff. But one thing that Drew, you said that stayed with me the entire time, the entire run, because I think the run for me felt like I was just holding on. And so I did keep quite a steady pace on the run throughout. I don't think I was a bit faster in the beginning, and I slowed down just a little bit towards the end. But you said this is something that you do, but just basically, go to sleep, like let your body do the work and go to sleep. And I think I said to myself, go to sleep 50 times during the run. I was like, go sleep, go sleep. As it was hurting, my legs were getting tired. I wasn't feeling great. I was getting nausea. But I was go sleep, go sleep. And so surprisingly, the run didn't feel as bad. And yeah, I think the whole thing was really fun and tough. And I do realize I have a lot to grow, and it's mostly in the bike. So, yeah, but the run, I think because of the background and just holding on, and pushing through pain, that's where my experience with the running came and helped me out during the race, big time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing,
Yeah,
Beth. Yeah,
thank
Tony,
you.
thanks
Thanks
for your
for having
insight.
me.
Yeah, this
Cool,
is
cool.
fun.
Yeah, yeah. This is good. Yeah,
Those-
it's always nice to see someone doing their first half, and I can remember back in the day when I did mine. You were way more prepared than I was when I did mine. So yeah, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but it's just an amazing experience, and it seems like it was the same for you. So it's always super cool to hear everyone's story.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it's fun to share.
Well, this has been great. Thanks for coming on, guys. Still getting the hang of this podcast thing, but I think we should do more, and this will go up on YouTube. Thanks for everyone who's tuned in. If you haven't already, hit like, share it with a friend, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Happy running.